Hey guys, I'm Ebony Amber and welcome to Paranormal Phenomenon with Ebony Amber. If this is your first time here, be sure to check out my first video, which was called Gnomes, Ghosts, and Ants, Oh My. I'll put a link down below if you want to check it out. If this is a follow-up visit, hello, I hope you're having a wonderful day. Thanks for visiting me again. And today I am super excited to share the second episode with you because we have some great experiencer stories. To start, I wanted to make sure everybody was familiar with some of the paranormal phenomenon lingo used in the following segments. In segment 2, called Scared Straight, the practice of energy work is mentioned. To properly explain this could take an entire video of its own, so I've decided to just give you a little definition that was provided by Martin Azambuya, who is actually our second segment experiencer. Energy work can be a mental, emotional, or physical kind of exercise for sensing or mobilizing subtle energies. You may perform these exercises directly by using your attention, focus, will, and mindfulness. These energetic exercises may serve multiple purposes depending on their specific intentions, from the sensing of our surroundings, to the energetic cleansing of environments, to the unlocking of personal energetic systems, to varied methods of assistance towards others, and also shielding ourselves from external unwanted intentions. I studied energy work myself through an organization called the International Academy of Consciousness, or the IAC, which I will provide a link for down below. This practice is truly fascinating and helped me in many different areas of my life. I highly recommend it, and I might also do a video just on the International Academy of Consciousness and the classes I took there, but let me know down below if that's something you guys would be interested in. It's also important to mention that many people study energy work to learn how to have OBEs, or out-of-body experiences. I can say from the few years that I studied there that I did have much more intense lucid dreams, and I did in fact feel my energetic body above my physical body, but I never got to the point where I could consciously leave my body, at least not during a waking state. Now I'd like to rewind a bit because I want to talk about a word that comes up in our first segment called These Boots Are Made for Haunting, and that word is orbs. Experiencer Kaylee Doll makes reference to this phenomenon, which can also be referred to as energy orbs, spiritual orbs, or ghost orbs. They have also been described as spiritual vehicles, not only for spirits, but also for angels and demons. Such orbs are said to be balls of energy that emit some form of light, many times showing a color based on the emotions or purity of the soul which is emanating the light. Silver or white generally comes from a higher source, while black and brown are said to come from a heavier, more negative energy. There are many colors in between that can also be seen, such as purples, reds, blues, greens, and so on. But regardless of the color, you should always pay attention to how the visit makes you feel. And this basically goes for any paranormal phenomenon. If it leaves you feeling joyless or sad or depressed, but the orb was white or silver, there may be more clarity in your personal reaction than the actual color. Same can be said for a visit from a past relative. If you sense something is off or just not right, let me tell you, that ain't your granny. During Kaylee's segment, pay attention to the orbs that show up throughout her video. I also wanted to mention that no special effects editing was done to her video. I wanted to mention this not only to clarify that the orbs show up on their own, but I also wanted to say this because there are some really strange, like jumping and weird effects that happen in her video that just happened not normally, but paranormally. So without further ado, please enjoy the second episode of Paranormal Phenomenon with Ebony Amber.
Hi, my name is Kaylee Doll. I am a psychic medium. I've been seeing spirits my whole life. So when Ebony told me, like, hey, do you have a paranormal story to share? I literally have millions, but I try to think of one that really kind of stood out to me. And that happens to be a spirit that I grew up with in my childhood home. I know you always kind of hear that 3 a.m. is the dead hour, the witch hour, and it's usually when, you know, the world's pretty quiet, so other things tend to get a little louder. One of the main things that I used to hear all the time, which sounded like heavy boots, I would hear them from downstairs, and I would hear them walk up the stairs, and they would get louder as they got closer. And they would get faster as they got closer. And they would walk down the hall. So that's how I ended up nicknaming this spirit Heavy Boot Man. Heavy Boot Man, I feel like, wanted to make himself known in the house, to always try to get somebody's attention. Mainly mine, because I think he knew I was able to see, hear, and feel. There was one time where I think it was the first time I've ever seen an orb, but I didn't really quite understand it. And this was actually the most clearest I've ever seen an orb. I mean, I see orbs all the time, but never as clear and for as long as this particular time. But I was laying in bed and I was woken up to this purple like energy ball. And it was literally floating like right in front of me. And inside of it was a man who was probably in his late 60s, mid to late 60s. And inside the orb, he was sitting outside and he wasn't saying anything. He was just sitting on a bench. There was another time, you know, we all kind of have that fear of having our foot hang off the bed. Well, I woke up and my foot was hanging off the bed. And I thought to myself, you know what, Kaylee, there's no such thing as ghosts. And sure enough, he came by and slapped my foot. So I never did that again. And not only was it happening to me, but it was happening to my dad as well. There was one night he woke up and his foot was in the air. And it felt like somebody had a grip on his big toe. So the first night he looked at it, he kind of shook it off and went back to sleep, thinking maybe it was a cramp or something. The second night, same time, woke up with his foot in the air and I felt like somebody was grabbing onto his toe. And at this particular time he was thinking, okay, like, that's a little strange. But anyways, he shook it off. He went back to sleep. He woke up the third night, and again, his foot was in the air. Felt like somebody was grabbing onto his toe. So he looked over at his toe, and he says, "Knock it off." And his foot dropped. There was another time where I was a teen, and my friends were going to come pick me up. We were going to go out for the night, so I was done getting ready and I'm waiting for my friends to come, and I'm sitting on the recliner downstairs and I was the only one home. My parents went out, and all of a sudden the area rug that was on the rug flips up. It was almost like if somebody took a corner and threw it up in the air. I about died at this point. I ran out of my house. I called my friends, like, you need to come pick me up. And I literally walked my street until my friends came and picked me up, because I did not want to go inside that house. By the time I started having, you know, my friends would sleep over and whatnot. I have orbs flying all around me. When I would have sleepovers with friends, they would hear the footsteps at night. It made me feel kind of good, because it made me feel like, okay, this isn't all in my head. Like, there's really something going on here. So there was one night, I'm downstairs again with my dad, and I'm talking to him, and I'm like, Dad, you know, I know there's a little boy ghost in the house, but I feel like there's a man in here too. And I kid you not, 2 seconds later, in the furnace room, my dad used to get ready for work there. And then he had one of those 5-gallon water jugs, and like he would throw like loose change in there. So it was probably about a quarter to a halfway filled with change. So I mean, that's pretty heavy. And then he had a mirror behind it, and he pushed the 5-gallon against the mirror, so the mirror would kind of stand up. So after I said to him, I think there's a man in here too, we heard the loudest crash, and it was coming from the furnace room. And the 5-gallon water jug with change in it, heavy change, was knocked over completely. And the mirror was down on the ground, and it was completely shattered. So that was like, yeah, I'm here. You're right. Like, hello. I ended up moving out of my house, and I really didn't hear a lot from Heavy Boot Man. My parents watched my son a lot. And I noticed that every time I would go pick up my son from their house, I would be greeted by Heavy Boot Man. And even though people couldn't see him, he liked to get right here, right in my face, to let me know, like, hey, I'm still here. So finally I kept saying to my dad, I'm like, Dad, you gotta get the spirit out of your house. Like, literally, he is like in my face every time I come here. He's a miserable man. So just like if you're around a miserable person and how you kind of feel their energy, it's the same thing about being in the house with a spirit like that. It's just, you just can't see them. So finally at that time, I was more well aware of my spirits. I met an amazing teacher named Heather Delusso, and she helped me understand myself. I was talking to her. I said, hey, we have this spirit in my parents' house, and and I was explaining all my stories to her, and she's like, oh, I feel his energy. Like, let's cross this guy over. The day that we crossed him over, she came over. Another one of my teachers named Lisa came over. One of my psychic friends, and they brought over what's called a squawk box. It's really cool. It's like this black box, and it sounds almost like a AM radio. Like, you kind of have like that almost like white noise, and then you almost hear like a dial of like different stations kind of coming through. What the squawk box does is it picks up certain words, and you can actually hear spirit talk. As we're talking to, we still don't know his name, Heavy Boot Man, he kept saying, I'm ready, I'm ready, I'm tired, I'm ready. So like, he knew, like, he was waiting to be crossed over. This poor guy was stuck in my parents' house for so long, and we were finally able to cross him over. And the strangest thing about that whole experience is that at that time, it was probably close to 30 years of my life, I knew my house had a certain energy, and just to have that energy completely shift when he crossed over, it was the wildest thing. It used to always be so cold in my basement. No matter if it was the summer or whatever, my downstairs was always cold. And it's not like that anymore. I mean, I'm happy for, Heavy Boot Man, that he's, no longer with us in the spirit realm in my parents' house. So that's my experience. And I'm glad you all listened, and I hope you enjoyed it.
So the experience I'd like to share for this happened around October, November of 2003. At the time, I had began doing some more energy work on a more regular basis. And I had been told that in the initial phases, when you start to really dig deeper and do different types of energy work in a particular space, that could kind of shake things up, non-physically speaking, and it could attract some attention. So that's just to give you some of the context. So one particular night, I found myself floating on top of my body. This was a familiar experience to me. It had happened several times already at that point. I'd had some OBs from that particular point of my experience. So I was very aware and as clear as I am right now. And as I'm starting to kind of gain vision in this experience and really feeling kind of all aspects of my body, maybe I was floating around a foot away from my body, but I could feel it completely, very specifically. I had two closets on my left-hand side. It was a large room that I was living in at the time. The bedroom was larger, rather. And right where there was a hallway out of the bedroom, right at the corner, kind of to my left and ahead, there was a mirror. And as I put my attention just slightly there was kind of like a mass, just a black shadow of some sort. And as I put a little more attention, kind of like, what's that? Then all of a sudden, this mass just came at me with absolutely everything that it had. It was like a very, like a beast, almost like a beastly, it wasn't like an image of a beast necessarily, but the energy and the vibe of this crazy amorphous thing just charging at me. And I had never been so quickly terrified in my entire life, not before and certainly not since. And as that happened, as it came to me charged with everything that it had, I woke up in my body just completely stunned in sheer terror. And I was sobbing. It was kind of like a dry sob, as if I'd been crying for like half an hour, but I had no tears coming down. It took some more seconds, I don't even remember how many, for tears to start, kind of coming down my face. As that's happening, and I'm there trying to catch my breath, I mean, my heart was racing. I was, just, my chest was pounding. It was a horrendous kind of moment and experience. I perceive kind of this laughter, not in terms of hearing it or anything, but just the energy of this spirit, with this ill will and bad intentions, like this very cruel humor sort of thing. To my left, still there in the environment, kind of this, sort of thing, really enjoying my my pain, true pain in that moment. And so I had to gather myself with everything I had, because I was still so emotional in that moment, and slowly start to kind of, I guess, have my subtle energies, my energy flow out. I'd done this before in terms of cleaning the environment or getting rid of some residuals or entities sometimes in some environment. It's a little harder to do when you're in such an emotional state. So through all of these sensations that I was still feeling kind of like this entity, really on me, if you will, I started to kind of push that out. And after maybe 5 or 10 minutes of this, it took a while, I couldn't perceive it anymore, and the environment went cleaner. And as I'm still trying to recoup to get to a more stable place, I remember thinking, what could have connected me? What seed must I have to connect me to be so susceptible to this type of spirit, right? And then in that moment, as I'm thinking this, all of these images and like in a block came, that I could hide somewhere for 20 minutes and start to laugh, on my own, kind of holding all the laughter in with the upcoming scare that I was going to provide to someone. So there it is. So that was more, I guess, of a karmic experience, and there was the seed, I suppose. Needless to say, I haven't scared anyone since. And I learned my lesson, certainly, but I just thought it was an interesting kind of experience maybe to share here. And that's it.
Let's get into this. Hi, my name is Chris, and I'm from Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. And this story involves an experience I had 20 years ago now when I was 19. So a friend of mine had invited me to her place to watch The Blair Witch Project, because neither of us had seen it at that point. And then when her boyfriend got home from work, we would go to the bar together, have a good Friday night. So we're watching the movie. We're about 20 minutes, half an hour in. Now, it's important to note at this point, before I go any further, she lives on the 3rd floor. She had a balcony. There was no fire escape. There's no way that anybody could get onto it. Okay? Like, unless you're Spider-Man. I'd love to be Spider-Man. Anyways, so we're watching the movie, and all of a sudden, we hear a knock at the balcony door. And it was just kind of like, did you hear that? Yeah? Did you? Yeah, but there's no way anyone's up there. And we just keep watching and we don't think anything of it. So, about another 10 minutes go by. A little bit louder of a knock. You heard that, right? Yeah? You heard it? Yeah? Let's just go back to the movie. It's nothing. Okay. So about another 10 minutes go by. At this point, we're both a little bit freaked out, and I get up, I walk over to those Venetian blinds, pull them apart. Oh, there's nothing there. Okay, that's fine. Go back. We sit down, we're watching the movie again. 10 minutes go by. And nothing. So we're like, okay, good. Alright, let's just finish the movie. This has been silly, but about another 10 minutes go by. Bang, 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 bang. Repeatedly, somebody is banging on the balcony door. The little piece of wood that was kept in there to keep the door shut flies out from the Venetian blinds. The doors ripped open. The blinds are parted, and nothing's there. We very bravely ran out of the apartment without our coats, without our shoes. We waited on the front step for her boyfriend to come home. So he says he'll go up and get our coats, get our shoes, and he is just laughing hysterically the whole time. We get to the bar, and he tells us the story. Turns out he had taken over the apartment's lease from his older brother, who lived there with his wife when they were newlyweds. They had gone down to Cancun for their honeymoon. Their first night there, they went to this karaoke bar, and they met this guy named Ryan. And in the span of a couple hours, his entire life fell apart. He had gotten fired from his job, and then he went home right away and found his wife in bed with the neighbor, and he just said, screw it. And he boarded the first flight to Cancun. He'd been there for just over 2 weeks, just living it up. So anyways, they all really got along that night. So they said, hey, you can crash on our couch for a couple of weeks, maybe a month, get back on your feet, okay? But they never heard from him again. A few months later, the wife was going through some newspaper articles. Ryan had been murdered that night after they left the bar, and robbed. And every now and then he showed up to bang on the door, to crash on their couch like he was offered.
Thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch this video. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. You can also find me on Facebook under Ebony Amber or on Instagram under Everything Ebony Amber. I have included some info down below of some of the topics mentioned today, so if you want further info on that, check out the description box. Alright guys, thanks again for joining me, and remember, the paranormal is my favorite kind of normal, so if you have a story, please reach out and share. I can't wait to feature you in one of my videos.